Welcome back to For All Kerbalkind. Last episode we explored the moon with 2 more Surveyor landers and hosted a crew aboard our research station for 30 days. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union has highly developed their own lunar landings from previous airbag landings, now proving they are capable of bringing moon rocks back home from the surface after soft landing. And both of us are racing to improve our infrastructure in this, the final leg of the race to the moon. This is it, our last chance to speed up our program. Or pretty much our last chance, that is. Luckily for us, our recent mission control upgrade gave us the ability to accept a lot of contracts for their advance payments, and I did not yet use this to its full extent. But now is the time to do so. We're grabbing all sorts of interplanetary and lunar contracts that as of yet I've absolutely no plan on how to complete. Of course, we will attempt to do so, but think of this as more of a whole bunch of loans that we desperately need. With the funds gained from this, we'll be spending $2 million on both our build speeds and research speed. We aren't anywhere close to the blazing speed of the Soviets, even after this, but this combined effort should hopefully bring our Katurn V crewed launches a month sooner or so. Money is precious, we need a lot of it to tool the rocket, over $1 million, as well as to unlock very expensive parts, and of course build multiple of these rockets, but time is our biggest resource right now. And we're running out of it. We've got a handful of missions planned before the crewed Katurn Vs are able to be built. So, let's begin. April 9th, 1964. In Texas, Surveyor 4 waits atop the Catalyst D launch vehicle for its lunar launch window. Its mission to land on the near side of the moon may be the program's last, if all goes well. We've simply learned all that's needed for crewed expeditions to come, and mechanically, contracts for this have run out. Catalyst and Surveyor are away. "12 minutes from liftoff, flight monitors telemetry, and we're in orbit, near perfect insertion. 1 orbit later, and it's time for Kentaur to take us to the moon. As soon as we gain communication with Amalek to start the burn, which we were seconds away from being late for. We really are hurting not having a communications network up, but hopefully a mission from Wallops later on will solve that problem once and for all. For now, the burn is complete without fail, save for auto-maneuvering systems, MechJeb throwing the craft into a wild spin at the tail end of the burn. I forgot to hit kill rotation instead of node. However, this is corrected, and a correction burn to get us to the moon is performed. We're well on our way. Approaching the moon, Loros B is currently not in an optimal position to relay communications, so Kentaur will burn its remaining fuel to bring us to a loose lunar orbit with a high paraloon. Line of sight with the Earth for the entire maneuver. Surveyor 4 is released and is now in the final phase of its mission. The intended landing zone is a strip of surface directly between 2 large flat areas of the moon, known as the Mare Serenitatis and the Mare Tranquillitatis. To bring our paraloon to the intended landing burn start point, we'll now use Loros B on our first orbit to relay comms on the far side for a 19-second burn. The stage is now set for Surveyor 4's landing. A few short minutes of tense telemetry analysis back home at ground control is all that's left. The retro rocket fires for the final time. We're on our way down.
off the foot mark. 800 feet, 600 feet, 400 feet, 200 feet, 100 feet per second, 100 feet, 100 feet.
Seconds before expected shutdown, one of the 3 vernier engines structurally fails. The remaining 2 engines and small reaction wheels strain themselves to keep the lander upright, approaching the surface. Moments later, these systems also shut off to prevent further sideslip, and Surveyor 4 is dropped onto the lunar surface. Luckily enough, this happens close enough to the ground for the lander to still survive. However, sideslip was not prevented and causes the vehicle to flip onto its side after a short bounce. Everything settles, and apart from the engine which exploded, no other structural damage appears prevalent. Despite efforts using the last sliver of fuel, reaction wheel, and various robotic components of the vehicle, there is no setting this craft upright, not without help from crew on the ground, or possibly a rover. Its active mission on the surface is severely cut short because of this, but the mission is still considered a success. April 18th, 1964. The time has arrived. Dynasoar has completed its suborbital flight, verified its aerodynamic and structural integrity during entry-like circumstances. Now its first flight into orbit of the Earth and back will be piloted by Alan Kerbin. Originally, this preliminary orbital test flight of the Dynasoar spacecraft was planned to launch atop a Katurn V rocket. However, it was removed from the Dyna program in favor of refitting it for future upgrades and possible Trinity missions. The Katurn V is no more, to be replaced soon enough. The Katurn 3C, now launch-proven, is ready for crewed flight though. There is something to be said safety-wise about lighting massive solid rocket motors with crew on board, but Alan knows the risks and accepts them. Late in the April afternoon, the KX-20 lifts off from Texas. On the previous flight of Katurn 3E, the main engines lit alongside the twin 1205 boosters on the ground. This had undesirable effects such as a very high thrust-to-weight ratio and aerodynamic stresses in the lower atmosphere. This time around, the main engine is intended to light in the air after the boosters have burned through most of their fuel. A minute and 28 seconds from liftoff, the LR-87 fails to ignite, however. Pressure buildup or some other problem has caused the rocket to fail. However, there is no turning back yet as both of the solid boosters are unable to be shut down. Alan's trajectory at this point isn't very far into the Gulf yet, so this launch abort will be far less aggressive than the suborbital test failure on Katurn 2 in February last year that Alan also experienced. As the boosters burn off and separate, however, the Katurn 3 vehicle is thrown into a spin caused by the torque of separation and nothing countering it like the main engine. Alan struggles with the sudden force to the side, but works towards abort anyways. At this point, there are 2 abort options: separation of Dynasoar from the entire stack, or separation from the second stage, letting the trans stage intended for orbital maneuvering to attempt to bring Dynasoar closer to the shore propulsively. Alan goes for the second abort option, and after struggling to ullage and separate, the spacecraft is free from the failed rocket. Alan relights the trans stage's AJ-10s and curves his orientation back towards the shore. There's no time to calculate a proper trajectory in flight control, and Alan is a bit indecisive with his attitude at first, deciding between slowing his surface and vertical relative velocity. Either way, there isn't much to be done after all. Dynasoar is falling, no way around it. Approaching 40 kilometers altitude and fast, the mass of the orbital stage on the back of Dynasoar is beginning to flip the vehicle, and Alan promptly aborts from this stage. This sudden change whips the vehicle wildly for a few terrifying moments, but aerodynamic stability is restored, and Alan reports in with a quick reassurance that he is in fact still okay. The rest of the aborted flight is, to everyone's relief, smooth. No structural damage is visible, and the vehicle performs its glide path wonderfully. Due to the nature of being launched from a rocket, however, this renders the vehicle unable to soar back to the shore, instead needing to splash down in the Gulf of Mexico. Alan really hasn't had luck flying the Dynasoar. Every one of his flights, something critical has failed on the launch vehicle. At least this time, he's had experience in this exact situation before. Otherwise, the result could have been much, much worse. Less than 10 minutes from liftoff, Alan braces for a coming wave, and Dynasoar splashes down into the Gulf of Mexico. The mission has failed, but Alan is alive, and the entire program has earned valuable experience despite the setback. May 30th, 1964. 2 months prior, the crew of Gemini 7 returned from their month-long stay aboard the K4 research station. This late evening, Michael and Buzz will aim to double this feat, staying in orbit of the Earth for 60 days. Gemini 8 will be their ride up, and all systems are go. We have liftoff. For a brief minute or two, the sun peaks above the horizon, illuminating Gemini 8 in an orange glow as the second stage of Katurn V continues to burn. A spectacular view from the ground of the engine's plume and trail, no doubt. And inside the spacecraft, Michael and Buzz report all systems are go for orbit. And then, all goes silent. Gemini 8 is in orbit of the Earth. After the recent Katurn failures, launch control was a little on edge during the flight, ready with any and all abort modes and recovery operations for the launch tonight. But luckily, none of them were needed. Telemetry reads Gemini 8 is pretty much already on a rendezvous course with the station, needing very little in terms of correction maneuvering. All it will take is a braking burn at the station just before sunrise once again. Gemini 8 approaches the K4 outpost in reverse, burning its ohms periodically to slow its roll. Upon reaching a low relative velocity not too far from the station, Michael turns the spacecraft towards their target. It's still dark now, so all that can be seen is the navigation lights, but soon the sun will rise as they make their way closer. Using the station's relative attitude, the crew of Gemini 8 report a problem with the K4's orientation. It was instructed to maintain a prograde panels up attitude, though now illuminated by the sun, it appears the station is standing upright, so to speak. Ground control at this time reports additional problems communicating with the station, but have coerced its cooperation. The station now orients itself to the proper attitude, as Gemini 8 receives their go-ahead for docking. Approaching slowly, the spacecraft makes contact with the docking adapter, and the latching mechanisms remain still. Unsure on the approach, Michael backs up the Gemini for another try. Still no luck. The crew call down to flight control. There's a bit of a problem up here. Those on the ground and our two pilots brainstorm ideas. Michael attempts to dock several times during a comms blackout, performs a backflip to help him think a little bit, just before reacquisition of signal, and then tries to dock several more times, still without any luck. Something on either the Gemini spacecraft or the station itself is unable to latch the two together. I, playing the game, performed a few quick save quick loads and took a look at the vehicle codes in the save file, couldn't figure out what was wrong at all. Out of desperation, we try impacting the docking port at higher and higher velocities, also to no avail. Nothing seems to show up in the log file either. I tried docking under physics time warp, I try using a rails warp to clip the ports together slightly. Absolutely nothing is working, and I have no idea why. Until eventually, I came to the conclusion the port must be clipping other parts just barely. So I edited the save file and adjusted the position of that specific docking port on the station, loaded the save, and voila, we're docked. Real Apollo 14 problem right there, but we got around it and can continue with the mission. Despite the problems and extra time needed to resolve docking issues, Gemini 8 still holds its own record for fastest launch to rendezvous yet, half an orbit. And luckily, docking resolved in a quarter of an orbit more, so Michael and Buzz have still, despite all, beaten the Gemini 7 docking speed record as well. As if those metrics were anything to measure records by. But banter between crew about such things improves the morale of Foundation members, so it will likely continue. A short EVA to the station doors later, and the crew settle in for their long stay here in orbit. The mission is largely the same as the previous, albeit twice as long. But we'll check in with these two later on. So far, the mission is looking good. June 4th, 1964. A little known fact of the attempted Dynasoar mission 2 months prior is that its true intention was more than just an orbital test flight. Onboard reconnaissance equipment would have allowed Alan to photograph Soviet factories, supply routes, and launch facilities. As intel suggests, increasing activity could mean something big was coming. And intel was right, taking the world by surprise. In June of 1964, the Soviet Union launches their new massive N-1 rocket successfully, supposedly uncrewed, although carrying a useful payload to the lunar surface 5 days later. Reports suggest a crew-rated lander and multiple rovers may now lie in wait in the Sea of Fertility on the lunar surface. All the while, the United States is about to begin full facility production of their own moon rocket, the Katurn V. The race to the moon is close. Too close yet to call, but close enough to make us both nervous, I'm sure. July 8th, 1964. The Dynasoar program currently has 3 vehicles. The KX-2001, which is in Wallops undergoing extensive ground testing. The KX-2003, which flew earlier in April this year and had a launch anomaly requiring a launch abort minutes from liftoff. And that vehicle is undergoing inspection before being ready for flight once again. And so the KX-2002, as seen here, is the only one we've got left that's flight ready at the moment. It was not intended to perform the first orbital Dynasoar test, though the mission now rests on its shoulders as the only currently operational vehicle. Its internal and external hardware is specialized to allow docking with the K4 station currently occupied by the crew of Gemini 8, and its original mission plan was to demonstrate rendezvous and docking, and that will go ahead here today. Despite the previous launch failure, Neil Kerman is our brave pilot who will attempt to say hello to Michael and Buzz in orbit and restore confidence in the program, which at this point in time is dwindling. Mid-afternoon, the 1205s roar to life, and Neil is away. One minute and 25 seconds into flight, the Katurn 3C's main engine ignites successfully this time around. All systems are go. Nominal performance of the launch vehicle. The third stage of Katurn 3C and Dynasoar's orbital propulsion system, the Trans stage, lights its engines to burn for the last few seconds into low Earth orbit. Neil has done it. Dynasoar is in orbit of the Earth, finally, and the mission is well on its way. Unlike the launch of Gemini 7 and 8, the goal for this flight is not to reach the K4 station as quickly as possible. Instead, Dyna performs a 25 meters per second burn that will lead to a lazy rendezvous in roughly 26 hours. Until then, systems of the new spacecraft must be tested and verified extensively. The vehicle was not meant to perform this test flight as mentioned earlier, but is capable of it nonetheless. Propulsion systems, life support systems, ease of use, ability to sleep, verifying countless checklists, orbit after orbit. Neil really is having the time of his life up here. The only thing not able to be checked out is the equipment bay. The KX-2002 has a pressurized compartment all the way from the cockpit to the detachable aft bay, currently situated as an airlock. The KX-2003, which aborted earlier in the year, has an unpressurized equipment bay, which opens its doors, revealing various equipment meant to photograph the Earth, among other tasks. Testing this bay in orbit will have to wait for another launch. 27 hours from liftoff, and Neil approaches the K4 station, performing a single braking burn with Transstage before orienting for approach and station keeping. On a previous suborbital flight with the spacecraft, the front-facing window of the cockpit would cloud over due to reactions with the atmospheric plasma during re-entry conditions. To counter this, a detachable heat shield is installed, which happens to block Neil's direct view to the front. This is countered by the addition of a television camera located outside of the vessel, though quite low quality, will prove useful for docking. Neil, however, approaches the station from the side and underneath, able to acquire visual observation through the right side-facing window he is able to view from. Lining up with the station proves much trickier than with Gemini. Attitude and translation thrusters have imbalances based on fuel remaining and supply in the spacecraft, and of course visibility is a bit awkward. But Neil manages to bring Dynasoar underneath the K4 station. The docking procedure for this craft is also a bit awkward as well. Small grabby hands are extended, visible from either side window, and using these and a camera atop the vessel, Dyna slowly inches forwards towards the docking bar on the K4. This bar is intended to hold the spacecraft steadily as the crew of Gemini 8 inside the station extend their own docking apparatus to lock and seal the two spacecraft together, allowing Neil and supplies to enter the station without performing an EVA. This docking array is almost identical to that which will be used on the Trinity and LEM spacecrafts, seeing its first operational use here by the US Air Force. At the time of arrival, the K4 has been in orbit for 205 days, occupied by the crew of Gemini 8 for 40 days. Demonstration of rendezvous and docking complete, Michael and Buzz are reunited with Neil inside of the station. They have the next day or so to show Neil around the place before the vehicle is scheduled to return back home. For now, both Gemini and Dynasoar lay in dormant states, and the crew of 3 are supported solely by the station alone, and comfortably so, if you don't mind the tight space that is. But after an incredible stay aboard the world's best orbital Airbnb, it's time for Neil to come back home and complete the final portion of Dynasoar's demonstration flight, landing back at the runway in Brownsville, Texas. The journey back starts with undocking from the K4 station. Backing away slowly, Neil decouples the docking arms as they are no longer needed. 2 burns will be performed to lower Dyna's orbit to a set 250 kilometers altitude. This will help ensure correct entry calculations according to flight control's mathematics, simulations, and wind tunnel tests. We're going to do our best to bring Neil back to the runway. And I've spent a lot of time calculating different altitudes, inclinations, and burns to bring us back, pretty much utilizing a static angle of attack during entry, a burn point that is relative to a GPS coordinate, allowing us to consistently land in the same spot from a set orbital height and inclination. I've got an entire chart on this, so I'm pretty confident that we should be able to pretty accurately get to the runway no matter what orbit we end up in. Several orbits later, and Neil gets ready to perform one final retro burn with the Transstage. This burn will be roughly 13 seconds long, starting at a precise time calculated by flight control, one of the last maneuvers before atmospheric entry. The trajectory through the atmosphere will be able to be modified slightly by adjusting angle of attack and bank, though ideally, as little of this as possible will be needed to target the launch facility. The angle of attack held will be 15 degrees positive pitch from relative surface velocity. The current trajectory allows for near zero banking required. Neil is perfectly aligned with the launch site in Texas. The 0.05G indicator lights up. The stage is set. Dynasoar prepares for its long soaring blaze through the atmosphere, all the way back home. The coast comes into view, and Neil switches on the FM radio as the vehicle begins to slowly cool down from its ordeal. Picking up stations from Brownsville now, fantastic. Ground teams acquire visual as well, ready with emergency services both at the runway and surrounding areas. Reporting in that everything is go, the excitement fills the air. And approaching the Gulf Coast, Neil peers through the left side window and spots the Space Center. By Kraken, he's done it. Thanks to engineering of the vehicle and trajectory, we're soaring just above home. Heating got a little bit toasty during many of the dives in and out of atmospheric plasma, but here we are, gliding down towards the launch facility. One last dangerous moment before the mission is complete. As we all know, the one truth about flight is that one way or another, the aircraft is going to come back down. Neil aggressively banks left and right on final approach, and it is at this point that flight control notices he has not yet ejected the window cover blocking his view. When questioned if there was any problem with its detachment, Neil simply replies, "Oh no, I got this." Turns out this banking maneuver is more than slowing his final approach. It also is giving him his last visuals of the runway before touchdown. Speaking of which, touchdown is rather fast. The landing skids scrape against the runway as Neil fights the controls to keep the vehicle straight, pulling on the stick to use the elevators as an air brake. Unfortunately, Neil ends up pulling a bit too hard on the stick, or pushing in this case, causing the elevator to strike the runway and break free. Nevertheless, despite this, Dynasoar comes to a scraping halt just off the end of the runway. Coming to a stop, flight control erupts in cheers. Neil actually did it. Popping off the windshield cover now, Neil makes one last statement before turning off internal comms for the entire mission. "We paid for a whole damn runway. I'm gonna use the whole damn runway." That's mission success. August 3rd, 1964. It's finally time for Michael and Buzz to return home. After 2 entire months aboard the K4 station, relentless checkups and monitoring, periodic radio broadcast, calls home, zero-G experiments, and lots of floating about, it's finally time to leave. It's evidence to the team on the ground that at times the Kerbonauts have begun to feel restless and stressed out. Buzz more so than Michael, noticeably. A final system checkup later, and the two don their EVA suits and head back out to the cab waiting for them at the curb. Despite climbing into the far more cramped vehicle that they arrived with, it means home is just over a day away, and so they are more than happy for this occasion. Detaching from the K4 station, Gemini 8 performs its usual retrograde re-entry burn before diving into the atmosphere, intending to touch down in the Pacific Ocean nearby the Hawaiian Islands. Making it through the atmosphere, their 60-plus day mission comes to an end, as the brutal pull of gravity takes hold of them once more. Walking will be a bit weird, a little bit of a weird experience for a little while, as the crew later will tell press and the Foundation doctors. But the dream of long-duration operations in zero-G is becoming more and more viable day by day, mission by mission. And this mission is a success. All the money seen here, the $1.5 million, was basically solely gained by the 60-day crew duration record and the station crew swap contracts. Nearly $3 million has been spent on the Katurn V unlock costs, tooling cost, and production costs of 3 full Trinity stacks, still needing to be edited later on after a few essential tech nodes are unlocked. Building these takes a lot, and we're going to need to build a lot more of them for the Trinity program. However, we're going to address the mission control building one final time before the landings coming up. We essentially have to delay the crewed lunar orbit contract as we won't be making its original deadline. This essentially only cost us 60,000 funds, so entirely worth it. Despite upgrading the mission control center to its maximum unlimited amount, we still have hard limits on how many contracts we can accept, so we're stuck here for the time being. Oh, and taking a look at the 90-day crew duration contract, that's another 1.3 million funds if we complete it. I really wish that we had time to finish the build of the next Gemini mission, but at the moment we don't. Our gears are fully shifted towards Trinity, because the time is near. And now, one final boost to our infrastructure. Should all go well, there will be no more money coming in until the lunar landing, so the stage is officially set. 21 points into our research, 21 into our build queues. The finish line is in sight, and I still think it's anyone's game. August 6th, 1964. Years of exploration, science, program development, and experience have all led way to this moment. This being only the beginning of what will bring Kerbalkind to the moon and beyond. This Trinity Zero mission has reached launch day as the very first Katurn V stands tall and proud in Brownsville, Texas. The largest launch vehicle yet constructed in the entire world is set and counting down to perform an all-out launch test of all flight essential systems and procedures before the first crewed Trinity flight scheduled for next year. A new launch platform and mission control room have been erected for the program as well, housing a full staff for this particular launch. All members ready for their dress rehearsal. This is a big day for the Foundation, and despite the equally monumental launch of the Soviet Union's N1 a couple months ago, all eyes are on the prize, steady as she goes. Early in the morning, the countdown reaches zero, and Katurn V lights her mighty F1 engines with a force more powerful than expected. Windows rattle, birds take to the sky, and the low, menacing rumble is heard for miles. The vehicle is right on course, soaring through its roll and pitch program as it climbs. 2 minutes and 15 seconds after liftoff, the center engine of the 5 F1s shuts down on schedule, a procedure known as inboard cutoff, meant to reduce G-loads on the to-be crew for the upcoming stage separation. After burning through its fuel, explosive bolts and 16 separation motors pull the K1C and the K2 stages apart as the next 5 J2 engines ignite, right on time. First stage blowout panels eject as the 8 puller motors fire, visible from the ground and onboard camera. 10 seconds after this separation, the interstage ring is also let go and drifts behind the K2 stage. This structural piece held the 8 ullage motors, dry mass that is no longer needed. Roughly 8.5 minutes into flight, a second inboard cutoff occurs on schedule, although an anomaly is reported moments later. One of the 4 still burning J2 engines is reporting loss of thrust. Despite this, the stage continues on as ground teams monitor the situation. Less than a minute later, and we have outboard cutoff and stage separation yet again. Trinity Zero is almost to orbit. and now the K4B stage will perform the final push. Cut off, and the vehicle has successfully reached orbit. The APS, or Auxiliary Propulsion System, its RCS, establishes and maintains a prograde attitude for the vehicle as telemetry is sent and analyzed. The vehicle will remain in this configuration for an entire orbit before preparing itself to burn once more. During crewed missions, the K4B stage will fire a second time to propel the crew and their lander towards the moon. For our test flight, we will simply erase our orbit with this burn, testing its relight capability more than anything. Burning to an apogee of 10,000 kilometers, the engine is once again cut off. Relight has performed successfully. As the Trinity spacecraft is undergoing extensive ground testing, and the crew run countless simulations on the ground, the spacecraft performing orbital testing of the vehicle is actually not a Trinity capsule at all. In place of a capsule lies a structural mock-up, holding computer systems and avionics for the sake of automated system monitoring and control. Trinity 0 intends to fully flight test the vehicle portion of the mission, whereas future missions will test the crew vehicles themselves before the moon landing we've all been waiting for. The final vehicle left to perform flight tests is on the service module, an equipment and propulsion section of the craft responsible for keeping the crew alive and bringing them back to the Earth. The K4 stage unfurls its pedals and lets go of the service module. During crewed missions, the Lunar Excursion module will sit here, the crew's lander, ready for the Trinity spacecraft to retrieve it on its translunar injection. Today's mission, however, is far simpler. RCS quads are checked out and verified, as well as various service module systems vital for future flight. A camera on board the K4B stage captures the service module's AJ-10 lighting for the first of its planned maneuvers. This raises its apogee to 15,000 kilometers. The Foundation spends the rest of the day testing various parts of the vehicle in its eccentric orbit. Then, as the sun sets down in Texas, the final burn for the vehicle is planned. This will test the AJ-10 one last time, burning for 4 minutes and bringing its trajectory back into the atmosphere. After completing this burn, the service module has one more job to perform, testing separation of the Trinity testbed. At this point in the flight, all parameters have been accounted for, and testing is officially successfully complete. Although installed with a mock heat shield, the testbed is not rated to survive entering the atmosphere. Both vehicles will burn up as planned. This completes one of 4 necessary missions to win the race to the moon, which I'm not sure I've mentioned before, but Beardy and I have established the following rules for this moon race in order to make it more tense, more fun, and a test of our infrastructure as well as the vehicles themselves. Before being able to land on the moon, there must be an uncrewed launch of the Katurn V and N1, a crewed launch to Earth orbit, and a crewed launch to lunar orbit. These 3 must complete successfully, essentially no aborts or mission-ending failures, before we can actually go ahead for the landing. So, it looks like both of us have completed the first of 3 prerequisites. So the tension rises, and the race is on. Also, Carnasa has officially joined For All Kerbalkind. I have not gone over their space program or achievements just yet, partly because I already don't have enough time to make this video as is already. It's currently 4 in the morning. I wrote all of the script at 10 p.m. a few hours ago, the day before upload day, with none of the editing done yet, and partly because there's no better explanation I can give in this video of current events that Carnasa's video can't say better, so go watch their video right now, and Beardy's as well. He's been sending some landers and interplanetary missions and things, very cool stuff. I'm off to spend all night editing this video that you just watched. So, until next time, thank you all so much for watching, and peace out.